Welcome back to The Blind Spot. My name is Ian J. Peterson. I'm blind and I'm your host. On today's podcast episode, I will talk about haunted places in the USA. On this particular episode today, we're going to visit Savannah in Georgia. You will hear about ghosts, a little bit of history, civil war, blood, murder, and people who got killed and might as well have never lived the planet. I'm a huge beer lover and I strongly believe in the paranormal. Today we visit the River Brewing Company in Savannah, Georgia. What a better place to start the podcast series Haunted Spots in the USA. Throughout the podcast I will shorten the company name the River Brewing Company, just in plain the Moon River, to save time. Every year, millions of tourists are flocking to Savannah to see their cobblestone streets, parks, and beautiful historical buildings. Savannah is a place known for many things. Spanish moss, which is hanging off the trees. It looks very spooky. Don't touch it. If you touch it, there's a lot of creepy crawlies in it which will bite you and you'll regret touching it. It also has a lot of beautiful parks to visit, cemeteries to visit, a lot of beautiful squares to see, amazing history, and, of course, ghosts. Savannah has a lot of ghost stories to tell. All over the city, you can see haunted houses, haunted places, and we will figure out later in the podcast why it's that. One of the places which is haunted and which is this podcast is all about today is the Moon River Bar, a nice craft beer brewery. On April 10th, 1999, the Moon River Brewing Company opened the doors to the public. Finally, you could sit down and have a good drink in ghostly company. But first, guys, we have to look back into the past, so I'll have to tell you a little bit about the history of Savannah. So crack open a can of beer, stretch your legs, and follow me on the trip. I don't know if you know, but Savannah is the oldest city in the state of Georgia. It is a haunted city on sacred American Indian burial land. And that's why the city has a good reason for carrying the reputation of hauntings. Parts of Savannah rests on old sacred Indian burial grounds. And the last tribe known living in this area was the Yamacraw Creek Indians, which lived there and buried all the deads, and that's where they buried all their ancestors for hundreds of years. So a lot of bodies piled up during those years and rested in peace. And that was before the English arrived in Savannah. Peaceful times. Now I have a tongue breaker for you. General James Edward Oglethorpe. You want to try it again? General James Edward Oglethorpe. So the general was sent to create a buffer zone in the Savannah area to protect the area from attacks of the Spanish, which were just up there. On January 12, 1733, General Oglethorpe arrived with 120 settlers in that area. The desecration of the English while building the first colony on the grounds of the Indian burial could have caused maybe the haunting. Who not would be unpleased if somebody digs up the graves just to build something on it? In 1751, Savannah and Georgia were becoming a royal colony. During the American Revolutionary War, the British troops took the city, and afterwards, when the American-French Allied Army tried to get the city back, they failed. The Haitian battalion stayed back to fight the British, so the American and the French forces could retreat. Hundreds of soldiers on both sides, not so many on the British side, but on the American-French side, were killed in that battle, which makes me believe that there is a lot of ghosts created out of that, because out of my experience, out of my research, when somebody gets taken out of life unplanned, being killed or sudden death of an illness, and has no time to say goodbye to their loved ones or just to finish up whatever you want to finish up life. It could be then that you stay behind and stay at the place where you died. Could be a battlefield, could be a hotel, could be a hospital, could be anywhere. Now guys, there's a fun fact after all the war for you. The first cobblestone streets, the beautiful cobblestone streets in Savannah, were built out of ballast stones. Back in the days, the sailing ship had ballast stones in the belly of the ships to just balance the floating situation of the boats and keep the boats on a lower gravity level in the ocean, not to sink during a storm. And when you arrived at the harbor and got new freight on, you would sometimes leave the ballast stones behind, so parts of them, because you don't need them for the trip. So the ballast stones were left behind by sailors, which came as far as England or Portugal to do trade with Savannah. In Savannah, then, they used those ballast stones, because they had piles and piles and piles of it, to build streets and ramps out of it. And so nowadays, that's why we have the beautiful cobblestones. The sailors then figured out that cities such as Savannah and other cities would use those ballast stones for free to build the streets, and thought, hey, wait a minute, we can make money out of it. So in that process over the years, the ballast stones were changed into pieces of scrap iron to balance out the boats or ships. And then the scrap iron would left behind, but not for free. The sailors would just sell it for a pretty penny to the cities or harbors, wherever they anchored. And then in Savannah, they would use that scrap iron to build beautiful railings for the bridges, or beautiful ornaments for the buildings. Savannah suffered of a few yellow fever outbreaks. Terrible disease back then, and still terrible, but nowadays we can treat it. One of them was in 1822. In that time, around 700 people in Savannah died of this horrible disease and got buried in the cemeteries of Savannah. Savannah was a very relevant port city during the American wars. That's why they have a fort to defend the entrance to the city. There was a lot of killing and bloodshed in and around Savannah during those wars. Nowadays, Savannah is an industrial and a very tourist-friendly city. Thank God the bad times are over. No more fighting over the city. There's another little fun fact, not ghost and not killing related. The Girl Scouts of America for Savannah were founded on 12th of March 1912. So the American Girl Scout in Savannah founded on 12th of March in 1912. That's where all the delicious cookies are coming from, guys. In 1821, Eliza Early built the first city hotel in Savannah. It was not only a hotel, it was also used as a branch of the United States Post Office, and it also served as the Bank of the United States. In 1851, Peter Wildbadger bought the city hotel. He renovated it and put a live lion and lioness on display, just to help with business. I don't know if that would be allowed nowadays, to have a live lion and lioness in your hotel to get the guests in, but it's an interesting fact about it. The last guest of the city hotel checked out in 1864, just before the arrival of General Sherman in the War of Northern Aggression. So 1864, that was the last time some guests stayed in the city hotel, but the building stayed behind, and we'll see now what happened to the building. At the turn of the century, the city hotel, the former city hotel building, was used as a lumber storage, as general storage, office supply, and can you believe it, after all that history, it stayed vacant for almost 20 years. It was bought back in 1995. See, and as we learned, the Moon River opened in 1999. So 1995 it was bought, it was renovated until 1999, and then all the ghost stories started. If you look into about old buildings, like 100, 200, 300-year-old buildings, and people or companies buying those buildings and starting to refurbishing and renovating them. It is all almost every time, or let's say it happens very often, that you will have some ghost experiences. Because you see, a lot of people died in those buildings, a lot of people lived in those buildings, and they don't really left because they stayed behind or they came back after they died, and they don't really like to be disturbed or the building to be turned into something different. During the whole history of the building, first city hotel, then lumber warehouse, office supply shop, and all those years, it had to suffer during the yellow fever outbreaks. And as the building was a huge building and you needed a lot of space for patients, it was used for yellow fever patients to heal them in a makeshift hospital. But as the medicine was not good back in the days, many hundred of people died, mostly children. Also many adults died an agonizing death of the yellow fever. If you want to look up the aches and pains of yellow fever and internal bleeding, it's nothing nice to have. And especially back in the days when there was almost no way to be healed. Nowadays, if you go to the Moon River, you can experience kids or children running around. You hear voices of children playing around the building, which lead back to the yellow fever. Those are mostly ghosts which had died during the yellow fever and did not leave. They didn't know better. They maybe didn't even realize that they died. And if you go now there on the tour, or you do some investigation on your own, you definitely can hear those kids playing around, which I think it's a nice way. I mean, if you died and you're happy in the afterlife, why not? And if you can play in a brewery, hey, even better, count me in. That would be a place which I would love to haunt for the rest of it. The Moon River Brewery was formerly known as the tongue breaker again, Oglethorpe Brewing Company. Yeah, that's what it was called, guys. Many of the staff members now of the Moon River can vouch that they have seen or heard ghosts. Also, the patrons in their drinking can tell you a lot of stories about their experiences in the Moon River, and they're not all beer related. You know, guys, when one of us drinks too much beer, in Ireland we call them the beer goggles. The person beside you looks way more tempting than it was when you walked into the bar. So I really want to go to the Moon River one day to experience all of that myself, to see the ghosts. But let's go back to the story. A few ghost hunters and ghost investigators went to the Moon River to figure out what's going on. And if you follow their channels, or if you follow their videos, or read just their articles, there is a lot of ghostly or some paranormal action going on there. And it really sounds like an interesting place to be investigated. And obviously, with all the big name ghost hunters, there comes some fame for the Moon River too. Fair enough. In the 1860s, the Civil War hasn't right started yet, but there was already hatred in Georgia for Yankees. Nobody really liked them. And one of them was James Sinclair. While James Sinclair stayed in Savannah, the people of Savannah didn't really want a Yankee in town, so they tried to ask him politely, just leave the town, you're not welcome. But he refused and he stayed. And at one day, they rounded him up at the building of the brewery, pushed him out into the street and gave him a good beating. Although he survived the beating at the day, when he died in the aftermath, it's believed that his ghost came back, and it's still in the Moon River today because he liked it there. And you come back at places, if you know no other places, you come back definitely to a place which you really enjoyed. And so that's why James Sinclair, can be seen at the Moon River if you're lucky. I mean, can you picture that, being killed like that by a lynch mob? I mean, a lynch mob back in the days was like a lot of people, very angry, coming with, I don't know, forks, clubs, pitchforks, maybe it's my imagination, and they show up at your hotel. You're there minding your business, maybe having a drink at the bar or reading a book up in your room, and the lynch mob shows up, drags you in the street, gives you the beating of your life. Wow, what a way. Maybe James Sinclair also came back just to give the place where he was violently beaten, just to come back and give it a good haunting. To give those people which did it to him, which are obviously not alive anymore, just to haunt them a bit, saying, yeah, you guys, you effed with me during lifetime, now I'm gonna scare you. And if you ask me, in my opinion, why there is haunting or why there is ghosts in the Moon River, if you think back into the history of the building, first being a hotel, then being storehouses, being hospitals during the yellow fever outbreaks. So in between all of this and in the long period of time since it was opened, many people died in there or got killed or, just lost their lives. So there are many souls which have unfinished business or just don't even realize that they're dead yet and still hanging out there and thinking life is good. So definitely a place to visit when you're in Savannah. Now guys, for example, the American Institute of Paranormal Psychology called Savannah the most haunted city in 2003. Okay, this is a little bit dated number now, but hey, you have been up there, so there's definitely something going on. Guys, I'm just taking a little beer break here, talking all the time about the brewery. I feel a little bit thirsty, so I'm drinking a very dark black ale, brewed in the Netherlands, not related to the Moon River, but that's the closest I can get to a good beer at the moment here on the island. Now back to the Moon River. If you go there, you can have paranormal experiences in every single floor of the Moon River Brewery. Now let's go through a few facts of each floor. Maybe it's your cup of tea and you want to go, you want to research, you want to investigate, or maybe you're just up for a good haunting, for a little scare. Halloween is coming up in October, so why not the Moon River in Savannah? One of the most famous ghosts in the Moon River is the ghost in the basement. The ghost is called Toby, and he's seen to move through the shadows, to brush up against people. So people which are playing down in the basement in the billiard room can have some encounter with Toby. Either he just brushes by, or if he gets annoyed or aggravated, he can also push you. So watch out for Toby when you're down in the basement. On one of the tours down in the basement in the Moon River, one lady claims that while being down there, her right-hand side of her body got icy cold and she started to hear voices. So she was very scared and felt uncomfortable. So she was taken out of the basement and out of the building, which ended into the end of the tour for her. Obviously, if you go on one of those tours, you can go there with a laughter and saying, yeah, whatever. It is not that anybody jumps out of the cupboard in the bed linen. Those are real ghost guys, and if you approach them, some are peaceful, some can be, some can harm you. But I think everybody has to make up their own mind what they think about ghosts. But I actually think what the lady felt, it's true. And she is not the only one which had experiences, ghostly or paranormal experiences down in the basement. People will tell you that back in the days, slaves were holed down in the basement, and maybe they came back because they didn't have a good life and just want to haunt the place a little bit. It is not proven that slaves were down there, but every good story has a portion of the truth in it, and of course a lot of storytelling. If you go up to the second floor, there was a shooting, and James, a character called James Stark, got shot, but by a physician, town physician or city physician, Philip Miners. Very interesting. If you ask about James Stark and his shooting, you will be told that he was killed on the staircase, or was it near the kitchen? As always in a good story, ask 3 people and you get 3 complete different answers. See, in the case of James Stark, he likes to hang out on the main floor of the Moon River, and people blame him for throwing liquor bottles around. If I would be a ghost, definitely I would throw around a liquor bottle, but only an empty one. There's no reason to throw around a bottle with some perfectly fine liquor in it. Now, about all these ghosts and stories, if you look into storytelling, I did storytelling back when I lived in Ireland, and if you give one story to different storytellers, you will always have a complete different outcome. Not complete different, but everybody puts their own gloss, puts their own energy to it. And that also happens in Savannah. If you ask people in Savannah about a certain person, about a certain incident, about something happening, everybody will have a story to tell, and everybody will have a little tweak to it, which makes storytelling, in my opinion, so amazing, so interesting. I mean, if you watch a video or if you watch a movie, it's all there and no space for imagination. But if you go on a tour, if you just talk or listen to a storyteller, they can really drag you into the story, and you can really make up in your imagination the scenery of the story, which is amazing, guys. Really, really try it once. And if there are ghosts involved in a story, even better. If you're in a building which is haunted of ghosts, it's a complete different story. Also on the main floor, you can experience some grabbing, some pushing, some touching. Some of the Patreons would tell you while eating at the Moon River that it would have been touched or felt a touch on the shoulders, or just felt a touch on their bodies while nobody was around. So, who touched them? If you ask me, ghosts. Now, for you fine women out there, if you go to the Moon River, there are many reports of women that when they go to the bathroom, they feel cold. Not because the heating is not working, they feel that paranormal, very icy feeling when you can't explain why it's cold, but you feel it. As well, keep in mind when you go to the bathrooms, it is reported that sometimes when you try to get out of the stalls of the bathroom, you won't be able to open the lock. There is a story of one lady which went on a date with her guy. She went to the toilet and she didn't come back for 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes, when she came out, she was all scared and shook, and she told the story, she told what happened to a waitress and afterwards to her boyfriend. So what happened was she went to the toilets, to the lady rooms, restrooms, and when she tried to get out of the stall, she couldn't open the lock. It was absolutely jammed. She was pushing it. She was trying to open it with all her weight, but she couldn't. She was scared and she was terrified. And at her last push, at the last try, finally the door gave away and she could come out, and she was absolutely terrified. So that leaves me to believe that's the answer why the girls always go in groups. I never have seen a girl going alone. In my experience, I always see 2, 3, 4 friends going together. God knows what are you guys doing on the toilet, but maybe just to help each other out of the stalls. There was another couple down in the dining room on a date, and the woman of the couple experienced to be touched twice on her leg, and she said, "Oh well, it's a date. He's approaching." But when she looked to her date, she realized he had both of his hands as a fine gentleman on the table. So who touched her, guys? Can you believe that there are people out there which are avoiding the dining room area, which is called the haunted area at the Moon River? Why wouldn't you eat there? Come on, you have a fine dinner and you get touched. Why not, Especially when you're single. Better than no touching, huh? But all jokes aside, I mean, really, if you experience to be touched by a ghost, it can be a frightened moment when you're not prepared for it. I mean, who is prepared for it? I have my own experiences years ago when I had encounters with ghosts, and they really can shake you up. I'm not saying you get used to it, but it gets a little bit easier. But I by no means, I'm not a hero. I have a fight or flight reflex. I'm not staying. I'm just going when I feel it. On the third floor, you also can see a full body apparition called the White Lady, or sometimes referred as Mrs. Johnson. In the 1990s, there was construction work going on in the building, and the wife of the foreman, Mrs. Johnson, was pushed down the staircase and was falling down all the way to the end of the staircase. At that point, Mr. Johnson just laid down to work and left the building, never to come back. You can say that she didn't slip or she didn't fall, because the way she fell down the stairs, definitely she was shoved down and falling down all the way. Up to now, people can still experience on the stairs being pushed, being pulled, or being just messed with. So be careful when you go up to the third floor on the stairs, and watch out. Better hold on to something. Now, the top floor, our final floor. Although it's reported that there is not much of ghost activity up there, or people don't experience much up there, it's one of the floors where a lot of yellow fever patients were kept. But then back in the days, with thousands of people suffering of yellow fever, I think you stuffed any nook and cranny of the building with patients. When you come up to the top floor now, what you would experience is a very dark and heavy atmosphere, which can be creepy. Sometimes you walk into rooms and it's heavy. You barely can, you almost can't breathe in there, or it gives you kind of nausea when you're in those rooms. And the top floor is definitely one of those locations. There's also I saw a paranormal investigator who has a stone circle up in the building there to do some paranormal investigations. If you see a stone circle out in any building or wherever, just don't open it, don't destroy it. If it's made out of salt, of stones, of any material, just leave it as it is, because you never know for what it is. It can be for the good, can be for the worse. And another advice for you guys who like seances and Ouija boards: only do it if you really know what you're doing. Don't mess with forces you don't understand. It is easily a mistake which can easily be done to conjure up with a Ouija board, or conjure up with some seances some loved ones, and opening up a portal or a door into another paranormal universe. And you never know what comes with it. Maybe it's not your Auntie Mary just only coming to talk to you and tell you that she misses you. Something else, something darker can backpack travel. So stay away from it. And if you really want to contact someone, go to an expert. I would not go close to a Ouija board, because I think it is something which can end up very bad very easily. So you can see a stone circle up there, so do whatever you want, but just don't open it or destroy it. Just leave it as it is. It's most likely there for a good reason. If somebody has more information about the Moon River, or many stories about the Moon River, you can always contact me via email, voicemail. You can check out my Linktree on Instagram, or if you go on Linktree, you can find me, the Blind Spot 1667. I would really have more insight of the Moon River, of that place, and definitely of Savannah, and obviously all the rest of America. Now guys, something to celebrate. I'll drink a sip of beer. In 2010, the Moon River Brewery won a gold medal for one of the craft beers. I'm really looking forward to go to that place, because I love beer. And whenever I have the money to travel to Savannah or America, since I'm in Europe, I definitely will stop by have a drink, and hopefully chat to our ghost. Now I have a fun fact for you guys about Savannah. Not ghost related, just to chill you down a bit. A fun fact is that the scene of Forrest Gump was filmed in Savannah, the famous scene where he sits on the bench. The bench was removed shortly after they shot the scene, and many people came and asking about where's the bench, because they couldn't find the bench. You can find a replica of the bench now provided by the film studios in one of the museums. So if you're a Forrest Gump lover and you want to see the bench, you have it in Savannah. Maybe another reason to travel to Savannah. Now I hope I got you really interested into the Moon River Brewing Company. Well, I am, that's for sure. And if you want to find the Moon River Brewing Company in Savannah, you can find them on 21 Bay Street. So definitely a place to check out when you're in the area. So if you ever go to Savannah and enjoy the big oak trees, the Spanish moss, the park-like squares, the cemeteries, if you're up for it. I saw very beautiful cemeteries. I will make a podcast most likely about some haunted cemeteries in the Savannah area. I'll just have to research a bit. So if you ever go to Savannah, please don't forget to contact me and let me know your experiences. Share some stories with me. And if I may, I will use those stories for my future podcasts. Of course, I will mention your name. Now, if you think about it, the building where the Moon River is hosted in is there since the 1800s. In all those years, this building has seen tragic, has seen better times, worse times, was closed for 20 years, was reopened, was renovated and repurposed in many years, in many ways. So this building, if that building could talk, it definitely has a story to tell. And if we listen closely while sitting at the Moon River, drinking a beer or eating some delicious food, if we listen very closely, I bet we can hear some ghosts. And if you see one, invite them to your table, buy it a drink. Let's see what happens. I was told that the best time to travel to Savannah, Georgia is between October and April, when it's not as hot as during some other month. It can be very hot, very stuffy, and you can have a lot of bugs flying around and punishing you more than any ghost ever would. Now, guys, that brings us to the end of this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you're still listening, thank you very much for your support by listening. It's really appreciated as I'm just starting on this journey. If you can, just send me an email, leave me a voice message. You can find my voice message in the link tree in Instagram. You can also contact me on Instagram. Please rate this podcast if you can on the platform wherever you listen to it. Sorry, my voice is gone. Leave a review. You can find my contact information in the show notes just under the podcast. You can also watch me on YouTube to see who I am. And also, thank you for your patience with this podcast as I'm almost blind. I mean, it's the future is not looking bright, so to speak. While listening to my podcast and you hear some clicking in between, it is not just because I'm playing on the computer. It is just because I have two earbuds in my ears. The right one let me control the microphone so I can see if the noises or the voice is good enough. The left one I'm wearing is connected to my computer and the screen reading software. If you want to see about it, you can follow me on Instagram and you see photos of it. I have a very blown up document here and an artificial voice, which is called Nathan, reads me out bits and pieces which I need to know. So I'm new to this and I highly appreciate your support. Please tell and share my podcast to all your friends and family. I would really like to grow this channel because I actually want to travel the places I'm talking about. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast, and see you all soon when we walk with the ghosts again.